Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda. So I'm making this video to discuss about preaching, especially when it comes to gṛhastas. So I myself, I'm a new gṛhasta. I've been married for now 5 years, and we have a son who is 2 years and 4 months. So for those of you who have never watched any vlogs or who don't know, I opened a temple here in central China in the province of Henan about 3 years ago, a bit more than 3 years, 3.5 years ago. Before that, I was working here in a big city in South China, and due to the preaching of His Grace Gopal Prabhu, he asked me to go up north and try to open a temple, and that's what we did. So we went there, and it was a huge adventure. A lot of it has been recorded in our videos, in our vlogs. And I really thank the Lord that He gave me the opportunity to experience that. And this was before we had a child, so it was my wife and I. At that time, like I said, I had a job, so I gave up the job, and I gave up the apartment where we were living, and we just left with as much baggages as possible. There's actually a picture that my wife and I took just before departing, the day before departing, and it was with all our luggages, our suitcases and our bags. And that was the beginning for what happened to be the greatest experience in my life. And then what happened is that I got sick. I got tuberculosis, and due to the pollution there, I've always had weak lungs, since I'm young. I've got asthma, I had many pneumonias and bronchitis, etc. So I got tuberculosis, so I had to come back down south where the air is better, and to do the treatment also. I could not afford to just, actually I could not continue preaching because tuberculosis is contagious, so how to preach if you're contagious? So I had to come down here, and we stayed a couple of months with the Matajis in the temple here, and actually I had my own room. Every time I was going out the room, I was wearing the mask. I could not interact with my son so much. Anyway, big thing. And since then, after that, I decided to, I had to start working again to support my family. So just to give a quick history, when I came back, I wanted to stay near the Matajis. The Matajis are here in Guangzhou, but where they live is very expensive. It's more near the center of the city, so the rent is very high. And at the beginning, I stayed with them, and then I started to look for a job near them. I made a few phone calls, and I even went to an application, to a job application, job interview. And somehow or other, I couldn't find anything there. And then I thought, well, then let me find a place which is less expensive to live and which has better air. And this is where we are now. And also I found a job right next to where we live. So this is where we've been for the past soon 2 years. But I'm always thinking on how to preach, because according to Śrīla Prabhupāda's teaching, preaching is very, very important, very essential. So we'll be taking a look at a few verses and also classes and letters from Śrīla Prabhupāda. Should us, gṛhasta, also be full-time?
But our main business is preaching. Either do it as gṛhasta or as sadhana, it does not matter. This is only formality. Real work is preaching. Just like Ramananda Rai was a gṛhasta and Krishna, Lord Chaitanya was a sannyasi. But he was taking lesson from Ramananda. This is Chaitanya Lila. He is a sannyasi, and he is God himself. He is taking lesson from a gṛhasta who is his disciple. So the real thing is preaching must go on, sincerely. This gṛhasta, vanaprastha, these are material regulative principles. Real life is Krishna's service. That we have to do. That's all. So whatever position is suitable for you, you accept. You remain as gṛhasta, remain as sannyasi, remain as brahmachari as it becomes suitable for you. But preach, that is main business.
So you see, the idea of being a gṛhasta who does not preach, that came later on. Most gṛhastas in Prabhupāda's time, when he was physically here, they were all preachers. Everybody was preaching. Everybody has this zeal of trying to push the movement because Prabhupada was instructed them to do so. The self-effulgent Vaikuntha planets, by whose illumination alone all the illuminating planets within this material world give off reflected light, cannot be reached by those who are not merciful to other living entities. Only persons who constantly engage in welfare activities for other living entities can reach the Vaikuntha planets. A Krishna conscious being is always engaged in planning how to take all of suffering humanity back home, back to Godhead. Even if one is not successful in reclaiming all the fallen souls back to Godhead, still, because he is Krishna conscious, his path to Vaikuntha Loka is open. He personally becomes qualified to enter the Vaikuntha Lokas. And if anyone follows such a devotee, he also enters into Vaikuntha Loka. But devotees, Vaishnavas, who are servants of the Lord, come forward in the actual field of work in Krishna consciousness to reclaim fallen souls. Only Krishna conscious persons are eligible to enter into the spiritual world. That is clearly stated in this verse and is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord says that there is no one dearer to him than those who preach the gospel of Bhagavad Gita to the world. So here Prabhupada puts the term Krishna conscious persons as practically being synonymous to a preacher, because without developing this, spiritual advancement is manifested when one starts to be merciful to others, when one wishes others' welfare instead of focusing on one's own comfort, even at the cost of accepting some material discomforts. That is the real symptom of someone who's advancing spiritually. And we can see all great preachers, even just like yesterday was Christmas, Lord Jesus Christ, he also sacrificed his life. If he did not preach, he would not have met with crucifixion, yet he did so because of his magnanimity. So similarly, Prabhupada, he would not have gotten all this trouble of having heart attacks on the ship going to America, all the headaches that his disciples gave him, all the trouble he had to face. Prabhupada clearly said it. He was happier in Vrindavan when he was there because there was no trouble. But it's just not enough. So in order to really attract the Lord, one has to sacrifice one's material considerations, material position, in order to try to help others. Because the philosophy states that we are part and parcel of the Lord. So all other living entities are also our brothers and sisters. We're all one in this sense. So why wouldn't we want to help them? Why would we want to only keep ourselves safe from going to hell, but not helping other living beings, other living entities?
But to be quickly recognized by Krishna, this is the shortcut process. He never says those who are sitting in a secluded place, meditating or chanting, doing nothing. He never says that they are my very dear devotees. But those who are preaching, nachatasma manusya upasthitni. That's why government takes more care for the soldiers, especially when there is fighting. They are giving life for the state. So their comfort first considers. In the war field, enough supply, anything the soldiers require. Enough supply. Sometimes the store is blown out, and again another store is ready.
So here Prabhupada shows that how the Lord will take special care in those who are engaged in his preaching work. So one thing that happened when my wife and I we were preaching, we had the temple in Hanan, is that at one point I started to get some criticism from some devotees that I was not working, that I was not earning, and that we were living off basically donations from devotees, from the temple's income. So this is actually a wrong conception. One should not think that because a gṛhasta is full-time, that he's taking money from the temple, that is wrong, he should be working. That is nonsense. Because first of all, the money that comes to the temple, this is Krishna who gives. Actually, anybody, even normal gṛhasta, the whole, everything that comes to us is because of the mercy of the Lord. So I knew perfectly well that because I was surrendering my life, that Krishna would take care of us. But because I got some criticism, and also my wife got affected by such criticism, she did not feel comfortable to live off devotees' donation. I decided to take a part-time job towards the end, and also our son was coming, so even more criticism. Or I was being advised by some devotees that you should work now, you have a son, So I knew that their realizations was not on point. I knew I was understanding better than them, but still, in order to avoid being criticized, avoid them committing offenses, and give some sense of security to my wife, I decided to accept the job, a part-time job at that time. So that's what we did, because otherwise it was begging. This is how we beg. And normally back in the days when Prabhupada was there, was book distribution. They were making millions of dollars of book distributions. But here in China, I cannot simply go out in the street and distribute books. So it was mainly trying to canvas devotees to give some donations, and we were using a little bit, of course, to maintain ourselves. What else could we do? But Prabhupada says that's okay. A gṛhasta can also, if he lives simply, he can also live off the temple money. There's no wrong with that. The problem is that if the gṛhasta takes the money for his own sense gratification, then that is definitely bad. So that's it. So I started to work a little bit, not much though, just a couple of hours a week, just to get a little bit of income. Nityo nityanam, chaitanas chaitananam, eko bahunam, I believe, vidadati kaman. So the import, of course, this verse is very important to show that the Lord is eternally an individual, and we are eternal individuals. But especially for us devotee, why this verse is important is that eko bahunam vidadati kaman. The one Lord is supplying for all of our living entities. This we must come to realize. We must come to understand that it's Krishna who's maintaining us. It's not because I'm working that I'm maintaining my family. No, Krishna is maintaining. He's maintaining even the birds, the beasts, the elephants. Why wouldn't he maintain human beings? And why not especially his preachers? So this is why some instructions from the Goswamis in the second verse of Nectar of Instructions, there's this thing that we shouldn't do, that if we do it will spoil our advancement, is that to eat too much or gather too much, get more than necessary. Work is a mean of sustenance. It's not a mean of accumulating money. This consciousness of making the bank balance grow is a demonic consciousness, and it's spoken in the 16th chapter. The Lord speaks, I will acquire more and more. This mentality of seeing the numbers swell in bank account is a demonic mentality. We're not supposed to do that. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stressed especially on Brahminical qualities. He didn't touch Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, but Brahminical qualities. And one of the qualities of a Brahmana is that he lives very simply. He's always a beggar. He's always poor, basically, because whenever he gets some money, he spends for propagating Krishna consciousness, and whatever comes, by the goodwill of the Lord, he accepts in this way. Of course, we're far from having a Vedic culture where people simply give in donation to Brahmanas. But for those of you who do not preach, and if you see some devotees who engage in preaching, you should always think of maintaining them. Especially if you see, of course, in the temple, the brahmacharis are being maintained and all. But if you see some gṛhasta, full-time devotee, you can also give donations to them. It's not bad, because Brahmana is supposed to be like that, supposed to live off donations. So if we work too much, this 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that is way overdue. So that's why I recommend gṛhasta devotees to If you want to work, get a part-time job. Don't work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. I know most jobs are like that, but if we pray to the Lord to help us to reduce this working zeal of being like an ass, because how can you advance spiritually if you're 8 hours a day associating with karmis? You're out there. I work only 2 to 3 hours a day, and that's more than enough to maintain my family. But even though it's just 2-3 hours a day, I feel what it does on my consciousness. I can feel the difference from when I was a full-time devotee, not working, to now working. I know how contaminating it is. I go there, I hear all their nonsense, I hear them speak, I see them eat. Everything about them is contaminating. So how can we advance spiritually? Even with this 2-3 hours a day, my mind, I need to be very strong in my sadhana at home in order to counteract that. So we must realize that it's Krishna who will maintain them. So if we surrender, why wouldn't he maintain us? So this is something that we must ponder upon.
One has to make advance, stage by stage, from the Kanishthadikari, from the lower stage to the middle stage to the higher stage. So, the next stage, from prakita, from material position, of course any devotion is, any devotee is not on the material platform. But if we remain more on the material platform, not on the spiritual platform, then we'll fall down. We'll fall down. Therefore, one should try to make forward march. The forward march is to become a preacher. Bhakteshu channeshu. Preaching means to obey the order of the spiritual master or superior authorities and do good to others. They are suffering for want of Krishna consciousness. Try to please them. This is the second stage. If we simply become blocked up for deity worship and do not preach, then we remain in the lowest stage. But when we take up this one, preaching means he must be conscious, very Krishna conscious, advanced.
See how important are these instructions. First thing, if you remain Kanishta Adhikari, if you don't preach, you will fall down. There it is said bluntly by Prabhupada. Second thing, preaching means to obey the order of the spiritual master. That means if we don't preach, we are to some degree disobeying the order of Prabhupada. That is a fact. Of course, chanting 16 rounds, 4 principles, that is nice, that is there. But it has to bring us to a further stage. Prabhupada clearly says it. There has to be further advancement, advance stage by stage. So one has to come to that preaching platform.
That is preaching. Therefore we are writing so many books. Unless we take care of the books and preach and read ourselves, understand the philosophy, this Hare Krishna will be finished within few years. Because there will be no life. How long one can say artificially go on, Hare Krishna, Hare Bol. That will be artificial. No life.
If preaching is stopped, there is no life. This is what Shastra says. When one does not preach, he is actually spiritually dead. That's a fact. There's no zeal. There's no new freshness. You can see the difference between those who work at home and those who live in the temple. It's a world of difference. The full-time devotee in the temple, they're always enthusiastic, and because it's always fresh, always something to do. And plus, there's the program. The program is very strong. Prabhupada's program from the morning until evening. Starting with chanting our rounds, Mangal Arti, Bhagavatam class. All these things are there, and they must be practiced by everybody. But to do it at home, I know personally, we're doing the program here at home. But what is it? It's me waking up at 3:30 and then preparing the offering and then being pujari and alone like this, and my mind goes left and right and I'm chanting the prayer and then I'm chanting my rounds. I'm on survival mode. Hopefully Shishi Nitai Gorasundar are here. Maybe you can go see a previous few vlogs before how they came, how we did the installation ceremony. I'm very fortunate that they came because I'm not falling down because of them now, because now my program is very fixed up, at least at home. But I know that it's not meant to be like that. It's meant to be with the devotees, not alone, you know. So, and after that, who am I going to give a class to? I'm going to sit there speaking to the walls. So, of course, then when I take prasadam, I hear Prabhupada's class, or sometime like this morning, we had the Facebook live class His Grace Nagopal Prabhu was giving, so that's very nice also. But we're supposed to be together with the devotees. That's why Prabhupada did not want his gṛhasta to live far away. He did not want it. If a gṛhasta lives far away from the temple, he's disobeying Prabhupada. He should be living right next to the temple, and every day he should go to Mangalarti. But to live far away, this is nonsense. You see, because how are you going to come to the program? How are you going to be engaged always in the preaching activities and all? How are you going to be guided by the devotees? How are you going to feel enthusiasm? You'll dwindle. So Srimad Bhagavatam 4.29.1b. This is in the purport. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Jivera Svarupahaya Krishna Nityadas. Every living entity is constitutionally a servant of Krishna. One should know this fact perfectly and should preach it to the mass of people. If one realizes that he is an eternal servant of Krishna, but does not preach, his realization is imperfect. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur therefore sings, Dushtamana tumi kisher Vaishnav, Pratisthara tare nirjanera ghare, Tava Hari Nama Kevala Vakaitava. So, my dear mind, what kind of Vaishnava are you? Simply for false prestige and a material reputation, you're chanting the Hare Krishna mantra in a solitary place? In this way, people who do not preach are criticized. Just see. Because the whole philosophy is that we should not have any independent desire. That means we should be ruled by the will of the Lord. And this is what Parampara means. Parampara means the will of the Lord that is descending. There are two things. There is the will of enjoying one's senses, and the will that the Lord wants you to satisfy his senses. And Parampara means this. So all the acharyas are fully controlled by Krishna. And if you surrender to the acharya, you become fully controlled by Krishna. That is the meaning of Parampara. Therefore, Parampara means this preaching zeal, this preaching mentality. That is the Parampara system. Because if you surrender, actually, it is very clear that you must preach. Therefore, Parampara system, to surrender to the Lord, means, my Lord, I do what you want. What do you want? I want you to preach my glories. Okay, I'll preach. And that is surrender. Not that I'll preach on Sundays and I'll work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. You know, it's not easy to hear all these things for those who are engaged in work. But we must hear these things, especially as gṛhasta. We're dealing with money, we're dealing with mundane people, with the wife's family, with the friends, relatives. All this is so contaminating because they're not Krishna conscious. They're all in the bodily concepts of life. But our goal is to go back to Krishna. And the shortcut process is this, is to preach. We must please him. Okay, for working gṛhastas, I'm glad to hear that along with your incense business, you are also finding opportunity to preach. Without preaching, and if we only do business, there's certain fall down. Certain fall down. Next, without preaching, our institution becomes all rubbish. All rubbish. We don't preach, it's all rubbish. By following his footsteps, you can approach Nityananda Prabhu. Nityananda Prabhu approached Jagai and Madai at the risk of being personally injured, and still he definitely delivered them. The world is full of Jagais and Madais, namely drunkards, women hunters, meat eaters, and gamblers. And we will have to approach them at the risk of insult, injury, and similar other rewards. To face such reverse conditions of life and to suffer thereby the results of actions is considered as the greatest penance and austerity in the matter of spiritual advancement of life. To sit down in a corner without preaching, risk, and to make a show of chanting Hare Krishna mantra is condemned by my spiritual master, and he has written a very nice song in this connection, which I am recording. The substance is that to become very dear to Krishna or Balaram, or in other words, to Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda, is to take the task of preaching work very seriously at all risk. Please always remember this, and you will be successful. At all risk. That is real devotion, you see, at all risk. That no matter what, I will preach, even though it means taking so much risk. So of course us who are gṛhasta, we have got wife, we have got children, they cannot take as much austerity as we can. So this is the part where we have to learn to balance how to surrender and still keep some standard of comfort for the wife and children. But like I said, why would Krishna not maintain us nicely? Right? If he sees that the whole family is surrendering for preaching work, why wouldn't he maintain the whole family? If we doubt that, that means we're doubting Krishna's words.
Without preaching the gospel of Krishna consciousness, we are drinking poison willfully. This is our truth.
Drinking poison. If we don't preach, we're drinking poison willfully. What a heavy statement is this? So now one might think, well, I cannot preach, I cannot give class, I'm not a good, I cannot do videos or what. So preaching doesn't only mean giving classes and all. Okay, so here we can see. Okay.
Wouldn't that indicate that a preacher is higher than a worker?
This is preaching. To help. Suppose you are preaching, and if I help you, just like I am preaching, you are helping. You are also preacher.
Also, this building is preaching.
This is also preaching. So it is not that preaching means simply talking. Preaching means everything. The construction is also preaching. The designing also preaching. Everything is, otherwise what is the use of spending so much money if it is not preaching?
Yes. Anything that has to do with propagating Krishna.
Yeah.
In any way.
That is preaching.
So the whole point is to be engaged in a work that is linked up to this propagation of Krishna consciousness. Just like in our Singapore temple, the two main speakers are His Grace Srila Gopal Prabhu and Tadvavid Prabhu. So does that mean that all the others are not preachers? No. And there are more, of course, there are more that are giving class, but they're not really recording them. There's Mahaprabhu, there's Pavan Prabhu, there was Subala Prabhu. But does that mean that all others, including the Matajis, are not full-time devotees, they're not preaching? No, they're also preaching, because cooking for Krishna, the prasadam is prepared, people are coming, they need to have prasadam distribution. So behind the preachers, there's also so many other devotees who are pushing forward the movement. The whole point is to have our whole life dedicated for this movement. That is advancement in Krishna consciousness, to stick tightly to the desire or orders of the spiritual master. Because my Guru Maharaj ordered it, and I am also ordering it, go on preaching, spread this Krishna consciousness all over the world. So here, Prabhupada used the word order. Śrīla Prabhupāda is ordering us to preach. So this should be in our mind always, that Prabhupada is ordering me to preach. What am I doing? And this is actually what's in my mind always. I'm always thinking, every single day I'm thinking, what am I doing? Am I actually trying to push this movement? Or am I sinking into the comfort of this gṛhasta ashram? Because you see here, I'm paying this apartment 1,900 yuan a month. That is very cheap for China, okay? And if you saw in some of our videos, the garden is very beautiful. There's an artificial lake. I have the view over the mountains. I mean, it's such a nice place, And my job is just 5 minutes away. Only working 2-3 hours a day, I can maintain my family. I have got my deities here. I have got the full program. It's like a perfect position. So why would I want to change this? I've got everything that any gṛhasta would wish for. Only 2-3 hours a day, I can pay the rent, I can maintain my family, I could even put about half of my income in the bank if I wanted. So what's going on? And because I'm stuck here, I cannot preach because only me, my wife, what if someone wants to surrender? Yeah, let me become full-time, what do? I've got one room is the deity, one room is my wife, my son, and I sleep on the couch. Where does he sleep? What do? How to train him with my wife and son living with us? It's not convenient, so therefore, I will have to live next to the Matajis. So I have to find a means how to do. Now I'm thinking, do we live in the temple? There's only one room available in the temple now. Or do I rent an apartment next to the temple, which would be very expensive? Like I said, here, including the management fee, everything. Okay, let's say it's 2,100 yuan a month. 2,100. That's about 400 Singapore dollars. It's about 20,000 Indian rupees. Over there, if I had to rent an apartment at next to the temple in the same habitation complex, I would have to pay about 6,000 yuan a month. It's 3 times more expensive. You see. So how am I supposed to do this? I'm thinking, do I rent an apartment and I get a job and all my money goes just to paying the rent? Because I don't want, if I'm there, I want to be full time, but I will need some money to pay the rent. So what do? I work only 1 hour a day, or a few days a week, 1 or 2 days a week, full day. So I have to think, but see the sacrifice that I'm willing to make. I'm willing to leave this nice, comfortable position in order to try and preach. Still, I feel disturbed. Why? Because of all these quotes, all these verses that are there. I'm realizing that I have to be full-time. I have to go back into the preaching spirit. A Krishna-conscious person should free himself from the clutches of Maya, and he should also be compassionate to all others suffering in those clutches. The activities of the Krishna consciousness movement are meant not only for oneself, but for others also. This is the perfection of Krishna consciousness. One who is interested in his own salvation is not as advanced in Krishna consciousness as one who feels compassion for others and who therefore propagates the Krishna consciousness movement. Such an advanced devotee will never fall down, for Krishna will give him special protection. That is the sum and substance of the Krishna consciousness movement. Everyone is like a play toy in the hands of the illusory energy and is acting as she moves him. One should come to Krishna consciousness to release oneself and also to release others. So Prabhupada, again here, very important points. The perfection of Krishna consciousness is to preach, to be merciful to others. And here again, such an advanced devotee will never fall down. This is also confirmed, I believe, in Bhagavad Gita 9.2 purport or 9.3 purport. Prabhupada says, when one is an intermediate devotee, a Madhyama Adhikari, he does not fall down. So you see, but the third class, if we remain third class, we will fall down. We will break the principles, or we will stop chanting our rounds, we will stop doing the program. All these things will happen.
Our advancement needs, the more we meet opposing elements, the better. Therefore, preacher is the best devotee because he is a soldier. Just like government gives all importance to the fighting soldier. When there is war, all come first for the soldier first. Then the civic people. Those who are soldiers fighting on behalf of Krishna, they are brave soldiers. Tasmat manuseshu paschitni priyapikam. Krishna says, nobody is dearer than him who is in the process of preaching this Bhagavad Gita.
Again, why wouldn't we want to become the most dear to Krishna? Because after all, even though we have a nice position like I have here, it's all temporary. I cannot keep this apartment, I cannot keep this mountain, I cannot keep this lake, I cannot keep this job over there. None of this. I will die. And this body, this very body, I cannot keep it. What to speak of the rest? So why not, endeavor and take a bit more of trouble in this life, but at least to make sure that I'm praising the Lord, and that when I leave this body, I'm going back to Him. I'm going to see Him and eternally live with Him. So this should be the goal, the aim, the whole zeal should be there. So now another thing about, I have a son and I have a wife, and there's a verse in Bhagavatam that says that one should not become a father, a mother, or a teacher, a spiritual master, if he cannot deliver his dependent from the cycle of birth and death. That is one of my verse that is driving my existence as being a father. When I see my son, I always think that how can I make sure that he's not going to take another birth? How can I make sure? That is my duty, because it says we shouldn't become parents unless we can make sure that they're not going to be coming back again. And what is the short process? Preaching. See, A preacher has to face many difficulties in his struggle to preach pure Krishna consciousness. Sometimes he has to suffer bodily injuries, and sometimes he has to meet death also. All this is taken as a great austerity on behalf of Krishna. Krishna therefore has said that such a preacher is very, very dear to him. If Krishna's enemies can expect salvation simply by concentrating their minds on him, then what to speak of persons who are so dear to Krishna? The conclusion should be that the salvation of those who are engaged in preaching Krishna consciousness in the world is guaranteed in all circumstances. But such preachers never care for salvation, because factually, one who is engaged in Krishna consciousness, devotional service, has already achieved salvation. So the whole point is to be engaged in service. That is the real thing. So preaching is the method and the reward. And the more one surrenders to the method, the more the reward will become manifested. The more we'll understand that this is the reward, the more we will feel the bliss of pleasing the Lord. So there's no doubt that someone who tries to preach until his last breath is going back to Krishna. There's just no doubt about it. It's for sure. So if I'm trying to preach until my last breath, there's no doubt that my wife will go back, that my son will go back, that my parents will go back, that, how many generations behind and before me will go back. So isn't this the best help I can do for my family members, even though they might not agree, or even though they might, put forward so many arguments that the Kanishtadikaris are doing? So here we'll see about preaching husband and wife together, gṛhasta preachers. So I'm very glad that both husband and wife are executing the mission of Lord Chaitanya so nicely and faithfully. Please continue to act like that, and certainly Lord Chaitanya will bestow all his blessings and power upon you. Personally, I am so much gladdened that the pairs of young boys and girls whom I have placed in householder life are doing so nicely in the Western world. When Lord Chaitanya delivered Jagai and Madai, he was also a householder. But when Jagai and Madai were actually reclaimed, his wife, Vishnupriya, was not there. But in this case, and in many other cases also, I find that my disciples combined together, husband and wife, are doing this preaching work so nicely. So I am especially proud how my householder disciples are preaching Lord Chaitanya's mission. This is a new thing in the history of the Sankirtana movement. In India, all the acharyas and their descendants later on acted only from the men's side. Their wives were at home because that is a system from old times, that women are not required to go out. But in Bhagavad Gita, we find that women are also equally competent like the men in the matter of Krishna consciousness movement. Please therefore carry on these missionary activities and prove it by practical example that there is no bar for anyone in the matter of preaching word for Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada saw very well that women in the West were raised in a manner as to believe that they are equal to men. So he did not reject completely the idea, he purified the idea that women also should be engaged in the temple work, Therefore, our temples are filled with Matajis. It's not only Prabhus. The Matajis are there cooking, they're there cleansing the temple, they're there, sewing new outfits for the deities. They even preach to newcomers or to other Matajis. They share links. There's so many preaching engagement that Matajis can do too. So this is it. Now this is my position. I'm trying to surrender more. I understand that this preaching Krishna consciousness in China will not go forward very much unless I link up with the Matajis there at the Guangzhou temple. Of course, if the rent there was the same as here, I would already be there. There would be no question. It's simply a matter of money. And also the attachment that we have here. I do not have much. Maybe my wife has more. It's a comfortable situation. And I know that the standard there is going down. I see how the Matajis are finding it difficult to remain strong in their sadhana. So we have these new deities which we installed according to the Pancharatriki Vidhi. We did the very bona fide installation ceremony. So what I'm thinking is that we will bring these deities and we'll be putting these deities there in the temple. That will raise the enthusiasm, that will bring some more freshness and new enlightening desire to serve the Lord in their new form. So and also if I'm there, I can give classes morning and evening. So in this way they will feel more enthusiastic, and also I can organize some preaching program. At the moment the preaching is going down, So definitely I will have a lot of challenges. One of them is I will have to be the spiritual support for 4 Matajis, the 3 Matajis there and my wife, so 4 women I have to deal with. the only other Prabhu is my son. Of course, my son is also helping, to see him doing devotional activities, it's also pushing me forward. I realize that he's an advanced devotee. He's going to manifest more and more once he grows up. And I don't want to be a cheap father for him. He deserves to be having a very advanced father because he's very advanced. I can see him. I can see how he's acting. So it's going to manifest when he grows up, and I have to make sure that he becomes also a great preacher. And by his devotional activities, he's also encouraging me, my wife, and even the Matajis, so he's going to be a great help. He's already helping, and the more he grows up, the more he'll be helping me. And that's going to be nice because finally I have another man, another Prabhu that's going to be able to help me. So I'm humbly praying for the mercy of all the Vaishnavas that are watching. Please give me your mercy so that I can do something tangible here in China. I'm very rotten, I'm very fallen, and I cannot do anything on my own. I require the mercy of the devotees. I require the mercy of Prabhupada. If I don't get this, I am just like a dog. I cannot carry out anything. So please give me your blessing that I can do something for Śrīla Prabhupāda here in China. Please give me the blessing that I can remove all traces of karma and jnana from my heart, that I can raise myself to pure devotional service, and that I can have the strength to do this very hard task of spreading Krishna consciousness in China. So, Hare Krishna.
And Krishna said, Yoga khemam vahamyaham tesham nitya vijuptana. Those who are constantly engaged in my service, I take care how to supply their necessities of life. Then why shall I disbelieve Krishna if I am Krishna conscious? Let me do my duty as servant of Krishna, and whatever necessities are required, he will arrange for that. If you become confident about this thing and completely engage yourself in Krishna consciousness, that is the stage of Shanta. That is the stage of Shanta. Completely dependent. Avasya rakhive Krishna vishwasapala. I surrender to Krishna. Krishna says, Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam saranam. So I give up everything. Even my livelihood, I give up. Krishna says, Sarvadharman. So, if I give up everything that I may be doubtful, then how things will go on, how I shall live if I give. No, you shall live. If you believe in Krishna, rakhishyati iti vishwasapalanam. If Krishna says that I shall give you protection, so why shall I not believe it? This is called surrender. Full surrender. That Krishna, let me engage myself in Krishna's service as Krishna orders. Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam saranam bhaja. Aham tva sarva papeva mokshishyami. If we take this assurance from Krishna, then there is Shanti. Otherwise there is no.